Diving into your next act or wondering what's ahead? Enjoy life as you change your path and embrace your authentic self.
Join me as we discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of making big changes in your life. New directions both personally and professionally. Shake things up. But don't worry, you are not alone. On each episode, we'll be sharing stories, providing valuable information, and introducing you to others navigating their next act. So let's get inspired.
This is a Candy Factory Convo, Life in the Next Act with Gail Shane.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Life in the Next Act. Today, we are going to talk with Wendy Steele, founder and chief executive of Impact100 Global Council, an organization dedicated to empowering women to transform their community through philanthropy and community service. Wendy will be discussing how Impact100 unites women to fund solutions to the most pressing problems facing humanity. She will discuss why philanthropy is so important within your local community. And Wendy will share Impact100's 20th anniversary celebration this year. Hello, Wendy, and welcome.
Hi, Gail. It's so nice to be with you.
Thank you. So, Wendy, what is Impact100 and how does it work?
Oh my gosh. So, Gail, Impact100 is a very simple concept that brings women together in local communities to pool their resources and then identify and fund the very best solutions to what they see as their community's most pressing problems. It works really simple. You gather at least 100 women. Each one writes a check for $1,000. Now, $1,000 is a lot of money, but it is attainable for almost everyone. It's a matter of giving up lattes, giving up a night out here and there. But $1,000 is also what I call a stop and think gift. If I asked you to lend me $100, you'd do it and you might not remember to ask me for it back. $500. Even really wealthy people, when asked to give a gift of $1,000, they hesitate. And that hesitation, that thought process is actually part of the design of Impact100. Because when you're attached to the $1,000 gift, and then you bring all these other women around, we pool our resources together, and then we offer up all that money right back into the local community in grants of $100,000 or more. So the more attached you are to your $1,000, the more you will feel responsible for the $100,000 gift. So it's women funding their local community. It's not necessarily women funding women and girls. So we have 5 broad focus areas: education, health and wellness, family, environment, and arts and culture. The idea being that there wouldn't be a nonprofit in the community whose mission wouldn't qualify to apply for an Impact100 grant. And the interesting thing that happens when we share this model in a community is we're lucky enough to often get what you might think of as the most usual suspects, those women who always raise their hand. They volunteer for all kinds of things, and many people know their names. The interesting thing, though, is we often get those women who proudly say things like, I'm not a joiner, or, gosh, I don't really like hanging out with women. I really prefer to hang out with men. But, they say, I've joined Impact100 because of the powerful work we can do. So if you look across at all the Impact100 chapters all around the globe, and you want to get a snapshot of who are these women? Who are the women who join Impact100? Believe it or not, I've been saying since the beginning that about half of the women who join Impact 100 have never written a check to a single charity for $1,000 or more prior to their joining Impact 100. And I call them newly minted philanthropists. Now, I can tell you, we are just winding up a big research study on the Impact 100 community. And the data I saw just this week said that that may actually be higher than 50%. It might even be as much as 70% of the women who join. We say we empower women. And what I mean by that is of that 70% or 50% of women who have never written a check to a single charity for $1,000 prior to joining Impact, is we sort of hold up the mirror and we let them know the truth of who they are, that in fact, they have enough and that their $1,000 can make a tremendous difference.
Right.
Now, the other 50% of the women who join Impact 100 are what I call seasoned philanthropists. This isn't necessarily a reflection of how much money they give, but really it's an assessment of the fact that they've written a check for at least $1,000 to a charity prior to joining Impact 100, and they see Impact as a way to diversify their giving portfolio and leverage their gifts. Now, everything about Impact 100 is owned, if you will, and managed by those local members. And so what that means is that when you join Impact 100 by writing a check for $1,000, you have the opportunity to design your own experience. If all you want to do is write that check and vote at the annual meeting, you are not asked to do anything else. It is a true no guilt organization, no bait and switch. But what we do know is the more women are involved, the more they actually get out of the experience. They will enjoy it more, feel more connected, and learn more about their community if they choose to serve. And there are lots of ways that they can serve. Impact chapters are run 100% by volunteers, and those volunteers are our members. That's how we can take the full $1,000 membership, combine it with everyone else's, and give the entire thing away, is that all of the work gets done by people who are doing it just from the good of their hearts as volunteers. Now, if they do choose to serve on a grant review committee, what happens in the Impact 100 calendar is the first part of the calendar is when we recruit members. This is when we try to spread the word that any woman from anywhere within this geographic reach can raise her hand, write her check, and join us. You don't need to know anyone. You don't have to be invited. You don't have to have any special skills. You just have to want to get involved. We cut off membership at a certain date. And then there is what we call the big reveal. And the big reveal is when we announce to our local community exactly how many women we have, which translates to how much money we have to give away. And we invite nonprofits to come learn about our process and apply for a grant. When they do, they apply across these 5 focus areas. So when women choose to get involved, one of the things they can do that's the most meaningful is serve on a grant review committee. In that case, she is sitting around the proverbial table with as many other women who have opted to come and serve in this way and review the grant applications that come in within a particular focus area. This is where it gets really interesting. Impact 100 was founded on the notion that we needed a fully diverse group of members. That starts at the top with a fully diverse leadership board. Now, when I talk about diversity in this context, of course, I'm talking about, race and ethnicity and age and all the things that you might think of, the sorts of things that are reported on a census. And that's important. But we go a little deeper. We sort of extend this view of diversity to mean anything that makes you unique. So it might be a stay-at-home mom versus a work outside the home mom. It might be a single versus married, working versus retired, this zip code or that, uptown, downtown, where your kids go to school, by every measure, your skills and your interests. Now, when you get diverse women around a table, you get robust dialogue. And when you add all of the measures of diversity we've been talking about, and then remember that you may have a newly minted philanthropist and a seasoned philanthropist all around the same table, their perspective brings a really unique view in the grant application assessment. For example, for a newly minted philanthropist, she may really know the local community, know where the nonprofit has to be located in order to be on the right bus line, or which community partners have to be a part of it, and how difficult certain services are to access. Meanwhile, the seasoned philanthropist, she has a view from the mountaintop. She knows what's happening in the grand scheme of this focus area, what other cities are doing, what other nonprofits are doing, what works, what's in vogue, and perhaps what's not. And if you imagine every sort of shade of experience around that table, the conversation becomes really robust, and we end up making better, more informed decisions. The other thing that happens, even though we don't ever view Impact 100 as a social group, when you roll up your sleeves and you work together and you talk at a level where you're assessing, which is a better solution and which problem is more pressing and how do we move forward around a table, even if it's a virtual one, what ends up happening is friendships are forged. People whose paths wouldn't otherwise cross find that they share common interests and a common desire to do more good. And so we get better decisions, but then we also get deeper relationships. We found for many of those women who, whether they've written, this is their first check for $1,000 or one of many, is that the Impact 100 experience sort of sets them on the path of deeper community engagement. They start to feel more informed. And, there's something that happens once you know something that you didn't know before. I often say you can't unknow it. It's you now see your world differently, and you see yourself playing in that world a little differently. And so we see women who feel more engaged, who step up in bigger ways, not just within their families or at their jobs, but out in the community in ways that they hadn't done before. And so it really is this sort of, once you open the door to philanthropy and community service, it changes you and it inspires women to want to dig in deeper. And this only becomes step one.
Wendy, there's so many levels, and I'm sure it's evolved. It's been 20 years. As founder, how did you come up with this wonderful idea of Impact 100?
Oh my gosh. Well, probably this was a next act nobody would have seen coming for me. I was a very unlikely creator of a philanthropic model. To give you a little background, I've lived in lots of cities. I was born in Connecticut. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. I went back to Connecticut for college, lived on the East Coast in Massachusetts and Connecticut for several years, and then relocated to Cincinnati, Ohio, a place where I didn't know a soul, and which is not unusual in my life. That moves tend to happen that way for me. And I did what I have always done, and that is I got involved in the community. I was lucky. I grew up in a family that talked about giving back, and so I just always did. It was always a part of my life. I'm also very much a generalist. I'm not someone who has one pet cause that I really care about or or one area of interest. I'm really interested in the best solution across the board. And so I moved to Cincinnati and got involved in all the usual things. I was junior league and I served in the church, and I got involved in nonprofit fundraisers and served on boards. And along the way, I was meeting all kinds of really remarkable women. Now, Cincinnati is a unique place to live, especially coming from New England. Cincinnati, the economics actually work in your favor. The cost of living in Cincinnati is surprisingly low, yet there are a lot of corporate headquarters and so really well-paying jobs. And when you look at that math, I expected to see far more community involvement than I would have found among my colleagues on the East Coast. And for whatever reason, I just didn't find that. And so when I would invite women to come join me, they would tell me all the reasons why they couldn't. And it was things like, gosh, Wendy, I travel for my job. I can't make regular meetings. Or they would say, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I can't afford to pay a babysitter $10 an hour to come and volunteer with you. Sometimes I'd be involved in the garden center and they would say, well, I'm really only interested in health and human service issues, or I am not sure I agree. They would also say things like, didn't you read the story about the nonprofit CEO that makes a 7-figure salary and flies around on a private jet? They're all like that. It's a racket. I don't want to do anything more about that. I don't want to support that. So you sort of think, oh my word, one by one in these conversations, I would try to sort of reason with them and explain the pieces that they might have understood well and the pieces that they might not have. And I just wasn't getting through. And in the summer of 2001, I was on vacation with my children. And for whatever reason, it just really was bothering me. And I got out a spiral notebook and I wrote down every objection that I'd heard over the past many years, why women were not involved. And it was just so critical in my mind. Not only did I think that these women needed to get involved, I knew it would be so good for them to know what it felt like to be involved in the community in this way. I knew the community needed them, needed their brains, their hearts, and frankly, their checkbooks. And so in this spiral notebook, and I should say that my day job, I'm a private banker. So I was in banking. I like numbers. And so I thought, well, gosh, how can we do this? And one by one, everything that I wrote in that spiral notebook was designed to overcome a barrier, to remove them. Because part of what I realized that summer was that as much as women's roles had changed in communities, only in 1986 could women borrow in their own name, and this was 2001. So it wasn't that long ago. As women's roles had evolved, our avenues for philanthropy had not kept pace. And women didn't have what they saw to be a viable path to community involvement. So one by one, I overcame each one, $1,000, pool it all together to a $100,000 gift, 5 focus areas. All of those things were a direct response to what I had heard the women say prevented them from becoming involved. And now bear in mind, I had zero business. I had no background other than just being involved. So from my vacation, I called smart women I knew in Cincinnati who were far more pedigreed than I and who had the sort of right experience in places that I didn't, and said, okay, I'm going to tell you about this crazy idea. Please tell me what's wrong with it. And if you don't think anything is wrong with it, then it must exist somewhere. I want to go get involved. And if it doesn't exist, then I think we should start it. And needless to say, it did not exist. And I ended up, by the time I was coming home from summer vacation, I had about 15 women I had identified as founding board. I got home, I got the kids in school, and we were just gearing up to think about starting this new thing that didn't have a name at that point when 9/11 happened. So as you might imagine, everything stopped. I can't think of anyone who was alive at almost any age who doesn't remember exactly where they were and how that felt. So it was a big moment of reckoning, and just hard to even fathom. However, by the end of October, I started to think, gosh, if not now, when? And if not here, where? It just seemed like more than ever, our community needed us to figure this out, to pool our resources and really come together. So I invited the 15 women I'd identified on the founding board to dinner in late October with the sort of, the outcome of the dinner is, are we going to go forward or are we not? And one thing I knew for certain, I needed to have at least 10 of those women be as committed as I was, or else I didn't think we would be successful. I didn't tell them that. I didn't tell them a number. I simply said that I wanted to see where we stood. By the end of dinner, every single one of them was in. And so that was October 25th. We had our 501c3 by March of 2002. We had 123 women and $123,000 by May.
Wow.
And we gave away our first grant of $123,000 in September. And the remarkable part about all this, so you've heard me describe it, I truly thought that I was creating something for very specific women within a very specific community. It never dawned on me that there would be women in other places who might feel the exact same way and be looking for the exact same thing. I would find that out later. About a month after we gave away our first grant for $123,000, I was called by People magazine. I actually thought it was a prank call. I almost hung up because we had so much trouble getting local press, but it was not a prank call. And the article ran in January of 2003. Is that right? Yeah, January of 2003.
Right.
And that sort of opened the doors for more and more chapters and more communities. But the really powerful thing I think about why the model's built and how it's built is that, and it's no different when we look at what's happening in the news today. If we watch television or read the newspaper or wherever it is that you get your news, there's so much to be worried about. Certainly then there was so much to be worried about. And I think today, one would argue there's even more to be worried about. When we focus on what's wrong, when we focus on everything that isn't going well, it's depressing, it's heartbreaking, it's really diminishing. It's very hard to feel optimistic or hopeful. You worry about what's going to happen next. When you shift and you join an organization like Impact100, or you start to really understand the solutions that are in our own community, and you start to meet the people and get to know those nonprofit organizations that are honestly all around us, doing the really hard work, doing the heavy lifting to solve those pressing problems. When you realize that you can be a part of the solution, when you realize that you now have a significant grant that will allow those nonprofits the luxury to pick their head off their desk, look to the horizon, and execute fully on a strategic initiative or a plan based on getting at least $100,000, it is so empowering. It changes how you view yourself. It changes how you view your community. It makes you hopeful. It makes you optimistic, and it makes you makes me at least so driven to find more people to get involved, to fund more solutions, to sort of grassroots bootstrap our communities, our neighborhoods from this place of worry and trouble to this place of hope and solution. And that's honestly the most important part for me.
And the way you describe it is so powerful because, I can read about it. I can go to your website. I can learn everything, but you speaking about the origin and the way you thought of this and the people that are involved, it's extremely, I'm going to just say it again, powerful. You mentioned that you have always given back from a young age. How can we instill this habit in our children and grandchildren?
Oh my gosh, Gail, that's such a great question and so important. I think all of us, I will say Americans, but I think it goes beyond our borders. Nobody likes to talk about money, right? So if you have a lot of it, you don't want to talk about it to your kids because you don't want them to feel entitled. If you don't have enough, you don't want to talk about it with your kids because you don't want them worried. And the truth is our kids are pretty darn smart and perceptive, and they probably know way more than we think. We think we're keeping something from them, not as likely. There are age appropriate ways. Now, this is part banker in me because I've seen and worked with so many families and helped them have those multi-generational conversations about money. But it is really important that when we ourselves volunteer in the community, when we make a donation of time, talent, or treasure to the causes we care about, that we talk about it. It's interesting. If you look at what a predictor is of children who grow up to be philanthropic adults, one of the big ways that they end up that way is if they have a significant life event. So think about Lance Armstrong or Susan G. Komen. Think about it, after 9/11, after Hurricane Katrina, something happened. And as an adult, someone said, I must give, I must do something. So I'm going to give. The other way is when they hear about giving back from a role model, a parent, a teacher, an aunt, an uncle, a neighbor. We aren't very good about talking to our children about these things, but it's critically important that we do in age-appropriate ways by modeling the behavior and talking about it. You are setting a young person on a path that will serve them the rest of their lives. And it's from so many important things. It's not just that they might grow up one day and join Impact 100, or they might join and give money to a favorite charity. Those are important. But people who give back, especially children, less likely to suffer from depression or have suicidal thoughts, much more hopeful and optimistic. I mean, this is data that we know to be true. They're more self-confident, they're optimistic, they're better problem solvers, they're more creative. I mean, there's data on this that tells us that the benefits of generosity are tremendous. So in addition to talking to them and modeling the behavior, when I grew up, when I went trick-or-treating, I don't know that anyone does this anymore, but I went trick-or-treating for UNICEF. We had this little box that looks like today's Happy Meals, right? And you go door to door and they put coins in your box instead of candy. Sometimes you'd get a bonus and you'd also get candy. When I would go babysitting at the neighbors, my parents would tell me to leave the house better than I found it. So while the kids are napping, I'm emptying the dishwasher and wiping down counters and all of that. So when my kids were little, I did some things to really model them. Now I'm going to tell you, they were little. These are elementary and preschool age children, very, very young. It was in the fall, and the kids were getting excited that Christmas was coming. So we had the conversation that Santa Claus wouldn't be able to bring very much to them because their toy boxes were overflowing and their bookshelves were full. And maybe they should decide, if there are some things they can part with. And there was a children's center a few miles down the road. So my children had those big black garbage bags, and they filled them with toys and games and stuffed animals. I mean, a lot. I called and I made arrangements privately, not for anything special, but just to have someone there to thank my children. I needed them to get reinforcement from somebody other than their mother. My gosh, when we went to this organization, the person who met us, it was a man and a woman, and they engaged with my children, and they said things like, they would open the bag and say, what do you think? And my child would pick up, oh, I think they're going to like this stuffed animal. And does he have a name? Well, I call him George, but they can name it whatever they want. It was such a personal connection. To this day, I'm getting a little teary remembering it. My kids are so willing to give because they understood from a really young age how it works. The other thing we did for years and years is we served Thanksgiving dinner to the homeless and anybody else who came into a particular location that we all served. And, they were little. They had to be a little older to serve this because the trays were a little heavier, the plates. But one day, it was one of the last Thanksgivings that we served. My kids saw a classmate there. They served a classmate, and they had no idea that classmate would have to be eating Thanksgiving in this kind of an environment. And I think that connection and that empathy to know it just made it real for them. That why is it that this young boy and girl who go to school with us, they don't have Thanksgiving the way we would have Thanksgiving. And so being intentional about how you talk to your kids, trying to curate experiences that are age appropriate but meaningful. All of those things, let them imagine what happens once they drop that bag off at Goodwill or wherever your favorite place to donate is. All those things, you are really building it in. We had a bank for their allowance growing up, save for long-term, spend right away, and give. And I mean, they're easy, they're fun, they're engaging, and it really makes a big difference.
It's excellent advice.
Oh, thank you.
I want to say you have raised and donated millions of dollars in 20 years, millions. With 100 women, 1,000 each, 100,000, over 60 chapters in the United States, United Kingdom, New Zealand, and Australia. That's quite an accomplishment in 20 years. You are celebrating your 20th anniversary. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You have a huge, wonderful virtual conference planned. Please tell us about the conference. We don't have a lot of time left, but tell us about the conference. Tell us what you're going to do. Tell us how you're going to empower women, and tell us about the book.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. So we put on global conferences every other year. So believe it or not, March 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, it will be fully virtual. I have to tell you, it is the best content. It's inspirational. There's all kinds of very tactical advice. You can download resources. It's fantastic. And you don't have to be a part of Impact 100 to attend the conference.
That's awesome.
So anyone can join. This is our 20th year, and I believe we will surpass $100 million in impact by the end of this year when we give away all of our grants. Thank you. And for the first time, we're launching, and it will continue here forward, the Global Day of Impact. And that's the first Thursday in November. And it will be the day that we announce how much money we're giving away in all these communities around the globe. So it should be exciting and powerful.
Wow.
And finally,
No travel.
I am working with my publisher. I think by summer, my book will be out. It is an awful lot. There's data in it about some of the things we've talked about, the importance of generosity, how Impact 100 works, what it feels like to be empowered, all of that. It also has some of my personal story. There are references. The title is a work in progress. We have not, apparently that's the last thing you do when you write a book is figure out the title. Who knew? I thought you picked a title and then wrote about it, but there we go. So we will find out together. The working title is Not I, But We, the Impact of Generosity. But I don't think that's going to end up being the title when all is said and done. We'll find out together.
Well, there's fabulous information, everything you need to know about the conference on the website, Impact100council.org. Wendy, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your philanthropic passion and vision. It just pours out of your pores. It ekes out of your pores. One empowered woman is capable of making an impact. Many empowered women are capable of driving transformational change. Mm. You can reach Wendy at Impact100council.org or 231-632-3588. I'd like to leave you with this. When you choose joy, you feel good. And when you feel good, you do good. And when you do good, it reminds others of what joy feels like. Mm. And it just might inspire them to do the same. Join us next time as we aim to inspire, empower, and inform. Life in the Next Act is a proud member of the Candy Factory Collective. You can find the show streaming on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and LinkedIn. And you could subscribe to the audio version anywhere you get your podcasts.
Gail has experienced many acts over the years. Living a full life, she is a mother of 2 and grandmother of 3, and currently calls Lancaster, PA home. An entrepreneur at heart, she's owned several businesses, hosted a popular radio show, and has written for prominent publications highlighting nonprofits. While she holds her real estate license in Florida and PA, she believes her true calling is giving others a voice.
Learn more about Gail at gailshane.com. Life in the Next Act is produced by the Candy Factory Collective at the Candy Factory Co-working Campus in Lancaster, PA. Production support by Jason Mundock and Anna Tran. Administrative support by Ann Kirby, Ariana Henderson, and Krisha Martzell. Notes and links can be found on the show post at our website, candyfactorycollective.com. Candy Factory. Go.